All right. Brian, what's up, man?
Oh, just excited to be here, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely awesome coming off this trip from Montana to Arizona and ready to get back to Montana, but glad I got to swing in and see you for a little bit.
Your mustache is very Montana. If I had to frame out a mustache for a Montanan, and is that a Montanan? Montanan, that would be it. Looks good.
Yeah, got a few recommendations that it needs its own Instagram account, but
Looks great.
one person that absolutely despises it, my wife.
Does she?
Man, every day she's ready for that thing to go.
Yeah.
Just prior to this trip, I had been growing my hair out for about 6 or 7 months. It was looking pretty good. She at least convinced me to cut that before taking on this trip, but the mustache isn't going anywhere.
Can't get rid of that. I like I'm doing I've never done it before, but I'm growing the hair over the lip because it just because, and it makes a difference.
And it makes up for the fact that I can't really grow a full beard.
Oh, really?
But I can grow a stash.
It looks good. Let's keep the stash. So you just came off a trip, and for people who are listening to this, to give them some context, obviously, we need to know who you are and what organization you work for, because one of my personal incentives for interviewing you is to talk about the organization, because all the important work you're doing. So let's get who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then a little bit about your organization.
So Brian Flynn, and currently serving as the executive director and a co-founder of an organization called Two Wolf Foundation. Two Wolf Foundation focuses on introducing combat veterans and first responders to wilderness and land stewardship and conservation projects. But our approach is a little unique in that it is facilitated by vehicle-supported adventure. We're building a fleet of rigs that are outfitted with the overland equipment that facilitates being able to be self-sustainable over a significant number of days, traversing the U.S. public land system in the West to access every different national forest site and or Bureau of Land Management area that we can have a positive impact on. My background came into the Army in 2003, started with 3rd Infantry Division, shot off to Iraq for OIF-3, thought war was frickin' rad and just wanted more of it, went over to the 82nd, got put into a battalion that was just standing up and was gonna have about an 18-month hiatus in deployment cycle, so went to selection and went through the Q course, ended up at 5th Special Forces Group, was there for a number of years in 3rd Battalion, and spent some time on a dive team, spent some time on a mountain team, and that was kind of really where my love for the mountains just began to grow. And when you're getting paid to do it, it makes life pretty nice. You're getting paid to go out and train and be up in these environments that just were incredible. That passion began to ignite. And but being stationed down in the Southeast for the majority of my career, it was just little short trips. And when I left active duty in 2014, spent a few years as a SEER instructor at Fort Rucker, and ultimately decided that I wanted to raise my family out in the West, and we began the process of moving out to Montana. We just moved to the Bitterroot Valley, about an hour south of Missoula, in February, and stood up Two Wolf Foundation to support getting guys involved in wilderness conservation and land stewardship. That's kind of been the 2-year project, and the trip that we just finished was the pilot. After 2 years of work, we were able to put 6 dudes in 3 trucks, traverse the West, camp, bond as a team, encounter obstacles and problems, and we're mission oriented the entire time. And that was kind of the major focus of what Two Wolf Foundation stands behind, is a new mission, a new purpose for combat veterans and first responders. When we transitioned from service, I know that my own personal struggle, the greatest struggle that I encountered, was loss of purpose and loss of identity. I had been this Green Beret, I was this, I was that, I had these skills, and when it was gone, I kind of really didn't know who I was anymore. but being engaged in land stewardship and recognizing the endless amount of work that is out there to preserve, protect, and sustain these incredibly therapeutic landscapes, because that's what they are to me. I know a tribe of people. I know a community of hardworking, task-oriented, driven individuals that can step up and begin to invest themselves into a new purpose, a new mission, a new identity, and that's warrior stewardship. That's the programming that we run.
So it's interesting. The conservation component is one of the incentives, but it's also, like you said, the mission of being together, staying on focus, staying on mission, being task-oriented, and that focus takes you away from the focus that might be in your head, or the mental instability that you're dealing with in I would say the real world, but makes you feel like you're back on the teams, back downrange again, out in the middle of like a long-range movement.
Exactly. Some of the feedback from the team members having just completed this pilot, guys said it felt like they were falling right back into old habits that made them the successful people that they were at the time that they were in service. They were checking equipment, they were doing map recons, they were oriented to the success of the mission and supporting the team. And, for a lot of guys that are struggling, that isolation element kicks in and guys withdraw from support networks. But a lot of that is just the negative connotation of struggling. Man, I've been this barrel-chested freedom-fighting mofo for years, and now I'm not doing so well. I don't want anybody to know about it. That's one of the things that we're taking a look at, is reducing the anonymity of struggle, being proud of who we are, that we're going to invest in this mission, in this trip, in this effort to surround ourselves with good people, to accomplish incredible things, and embrace the struggle that we're enduring. And knowing that by reconnecting with a team, that peer support effort, we're gonna get through it stronger by working together rather than hitting it alone. And I think that's in comparison to other mental health treatment processes in particular, the best example I can give you are friends that I watched begin to struggle, have the courage to step forward and seek help, end up at the VA, and watch the prescriptions just begin to pile on. And firsthand accounts from these close friends is that if they were already at a diminished version of themselves, if they were already struggling, the pills, man, just drove them worse. And then because that made it worse, what do we introduce? Now we introduce additional negative influencers of alcohol and everything else. And now it's a shitstorm. And for these individuals that we are seeking to engage with warrior stewardship, these are guys that have recognized, these are warriors that have recognized that wasn't working, and we're beginning to work towards something else, coming off all the pharmaceuticals, and being focused on experience, driven by mission, and recognizing that nature, the immersion in nature, is medicine enough. I know that there's a balance there, but spending time connecting to nature is rejuvenating, it's inspirational, and man, there are some moments where you can't help but just have a period of gratitude when you're out there. You watch a sunrise or a sunset over a mountain ridge, regardless of all of the problems that you've encountered in your life, for that moment, you can experience some gratitude and appreciate that small moment in your life.
What is talk to me about this last trip that you did, because I'm interested to know, like, what's the conservation part of it? What does the process look like? Is there like workshops that you've identified along the way that we're going to do, obstacles you intentionally or deliberately put in? How do you kind of process this and activate this for people who are involved?
So regarding the stewardship and conservation side, this particular trip, we partnered with the Arizona Trail Association. The AZT Vets, that's their Veteran Engagement Trail Stewardship Program. I've got a good friend, Chappie, that has been their program coordinator in getting veterans engaged in the outdoors. Love him like a brother, and he said, dude, if you're in on this, we can hook you up with a trail stewardship project on the Arizona National Scenic Trail. I had gone and visited him last year. We were working a trail reroute, building a brand new section of hiking trail for the Arizona Trail in Temporal Gulch. But this particular project, trail stewardship. So we went out and we were grubbing and brushing and lopping and fixing erosion, watershed issues on the trail.
Which is many in Arizona. I mean,
It's
everything.
We experienced upon our arrival, maybe one of their last monsoons that rolled through the Phoenix area. And we can talk about the obstacles encountered, vehicle-supported adventure, and being, living out of the trucks and on the road, encountering the effects of weather.
Yeah.
But regarding our future efforts, trail stewardship is just one element. I know that for me personally, in the vision and growing Two Wolf Foundation, I'm looking at engaging in wildlife habitat restoration projects. Hoping to be able to work with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation to do that stuff. Maybe Trout Unlimited. We've talked about being engaged with the different conservation corps across every state across the West. Pretty much has their own state conservation corps program. That those are the subject matter experts. I'm not it, but I recognize that we can bring the muscle.
Yeah.
But really want to focus in the wilderness, wildlife conservation, habitat management stuff. I think that'd be pretty rad for the experience in investing into these areas that provide us so much.
Yeah, it's like I always think when everything in my business plan has to include, most things I do, period, have to include some type of give back. And I think whether that's experience in learning as a child or as a kid, and then going into the military, it's part of what a Green Beret does as well. You do a med cap, and you go out and you set up a clinic, and part of the method behind the madness, which doesn't seem like a deliberate act, but often it is on paper at least, you got to build rapport with the host nation. You got to build networks, relationships, and it starts with doing something outside of taking care of yourself, being selfless, and using your skill sets to improve somebody else's position. And I think, I'm on board with you, man. I ain't leaving the West. Like I grew up in North Carolina at the foothills of the Appalachians, and I look at where I'm at even now, and I have to be surrounded by mountains. It's just a different feeling, a different way to raise a family. And our trail systems, BLM, National Forest, they need help because nobody's paying attention to them. There's so much going on in the world. Nobody's paying attention to vets anymore because they're over it. But what happens to our peer group, who are some of my guys that I grew up with in the military, they're still serving. They're squadron command sergeant majors, they're troop sergeant majors, they're group sergeant majors, and they're still in it. Although the pace has slowed down, what are we going to do for those guys who are coming out of 20 years of war? And again, like you said, they're dependent on pharmaceuticals as the solution and nothing long term. It's important and it's needed. What about whenever this is a nonprofit, I assume?
Yes. Yeah. We incorporated just back in February and received our 501c3 midsummer. And from there it was, putting all that work in, 2 years of building the plan and crafting the vision, refining the concept. And finally, upon our relocation to Montana, being surrounded by public land, now I was immersed in it, and it was time to move forward and engage. The nonprofit side has been an interesting learning curve. Coming from an ODA where you're just working in a small team, and it's daily assigned mission sets, and you know what the tasks are for the day, regarding running a nonprofit, man, it's trial by fire. I'm learning as I go and leaning on a lot of incredible friends and support, which has just been absolutely incredible to sit just like this and talk about warrior stewardship and involving veterans and first responders in, overlanding, land stewardship, and building, strengthening the tribe. And people just, what do you need? I'm in. This is incredible. Let's be. I want to be a part of this. And so for me, being ignorant to a lot of the nonprofit world, it's been incredible to have some support network to lean on while we get this thing up. And just getting done with this pilot, I'm in it. I haven't even made it home yet. I've been living out of the Forerunner for 11 days and still processing what just happened. But we had a night around the fire the other night, and one of the team members was there, and he was talking about over the period of his military career, the people that he had interacted with, that he had served with. There's so many moments where we don't invest in in those relationships. It's kind of just what can I use you for, to accomplish the mission. And so a big proponent of Two Wolf Foundation is promoting post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth, my experience with it comes from attending Boulder Crest Foundation's Warrior PATHH program. And an element of post-traumatic growth regarding the significant deep struggle that we encounter is that on the backside, when you push through and endure, there's an element regarding post-traumatic growth that discusses deeper relationships. That at that point, when you've gone through hell, you're able to place a greater value on the people that you have in your life, and that you're surrounded with, that normally may have been superficial interactions are now deep and meaningful. And sitting around that fire, there was a moment that I recognized, this is capitalizing on exactly this element, making relationships matter more. And that team, everything that they encountered, the obstacles, the struggles, the little button hooks to the plan, was just building this deeper relationship. And I know that, you're familiar operating in a small team. We are blessed to have experienced that. But for the vast majority, platoon size or greater, if we look at military, it can be hard. It can be hard to experience that true cohesion and commitment to each other. And I saw it in 9 days, these guys traveling across the West. There was these little flames of just, connection. And that's what we're about: connection, service, and growth.
I love that, man. I think there's a lot of impactful things. For people who are listening to this, me and Brian served at the same time period in different groups. But I met him in the Black Rifle Coffee parking lot. I was there for podcasts or something, and I was coming out and then met these guys. But when I hear kind of a senior Special Forces guy is starting something, I immediately kind of get honed in, because for the overwhelming majority of the people that I know that are senior guys in Special Forces, they know how to plan. And most importantly, they know how to execute. So when I hear, hey, we got this thing going, and it's beyond the startup, because I hear the startup stuff a lot. It's like they have a nonprofit, they're going on their pilot, they're going to start kind of seeing how this works. They did an after-action review, I'm sure. I want to get invested and involved personally, because, whether it's trail running or helping guys kind of through transitions, having been through transitions like Brian, there's a lot of lessons learned. Don't take Trazodone and Ambien at the same time while sipping on a bourbon. So I think it's an important mission, and I've heard it a lot. One thing here, when somebody says I got a nonprofit, it scares me, right? One of the reasons it scares me is because a lot of people have tried to capitalize on the veteran struggle. And even veterans are trying to capitalize on veteran struggle. 2 years ago, I went to a dinner charity event, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona. And they said it was about connecting entrepreneurs with investors. And they had this whole plug. And I showed up in a suit and tie, which I rarely do that. It just was painful. But I was like, oh, man, this might be an opportunity for the company, for Fieldcraft. And when I got there, they had fancy bourbon, they had fancy steaks, and they had a whole bunch of fancy people. But nobody was talking to the veteran entrepreneurs. And they had a person talk on the stage for a couple minutes. And then about halfway through, I realized, sitting there, watching all the veteran entrepreneurs who were excited about being there and immersed in this booze and this fancy shit, I immediately recognized that this was a tax loophole for wealthy human beings. And it had nothing to do with giving back to people, which is why I'm very selective on the 501c3s that we support. I only support a handful of. One of them, Warriors Heart Foundation, co-founded by Tom Spooner, because I went there. I know Tom. I went to his retirement ceremony. He's like one of the best dudes I know from the military experience. But then I went to Warriors Heart in Texas and did a tour and was like, man, this is amazing. So what I want to do is I want to get involved and invested with helping Brian out because it is needed. And I also, in my own experience, which I'm sure Brian has had this similar experience, have seen the benefit of what overlanding can do for you. Backcountry overlanding, living out of a tent on top of your roof, self-sustaining for periods of time and being immersed in nature will do a lot of good for you. But with that being said, I also love the concept it's called Two Wolf, because when I was doing that off my 4Runner as a singleton, it didn't make things better. In fact, I experienced being out in nature by myself made things worse, because all I had to do in nature was to think about all the stuff.
Just crawl into your mind. Right?
That's all I had. And if you watch an episode of Alone, probably about mid-season, you'll start to see that where people start falling apart because they're inside their heads. But when you're on task, when you're with people that you love, things shift. Talk to me about this 9-day experience and some lessons learned. Give me some pros and like some sustains and some things that you think you're going to flex for the next iteration of this.
So real quick regarding Warriors Heart.
Yeah.
So an element of Two Wolf Foundation focuses on and recognizes that we're not a critical point of care.
Yeah.
That discussion has been had over and over, that, hey, when there are people that are struggling hard.
Yeah.
And
addiction.
Addiction, suicide.
Yeah.
Suicidal ideation. There are professionals that can manage that. My involvement in supporting the veteran and first responder community, we have rolled back and peeled back the layers of the process of care.
Yeah.
And are specifically focusing on a continued engagement and support network building. For my experience, and one of the team members that was on this trip with me, we both found a path forward out of the darkness through Warrior Path, through Boulder Crest Foundation's progressive and alternative training for healing heroes, the post-traumatic growth training curriculum, teaching 31 wellness practices, teaching you the science of what post-traumatic growth is and managing and dealing with struggle.
Interesting.
And
clinical professionals there, I imagine.
So they've helped script and build the curriculum, but it's delivered by peers. It's delivered by veterans and first responders that have experienced extreme.
So your doctrine
struggle.
Is clinically assessed and validated, but then it's executed by peers.
Correct.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I went to work for them after experiencing it.
Yeah, and getting the help you needed.
And getting the help that I needed at the recommendation of, it's just pass it on, right? That's the philosophy, is just continue to promote and pass on post-traumatic growth experiences. So the way that came about is another brethren of the regiment, one of my best friends in life, nearing retirement, that looming transition and the pressure of losing identity, mission, and purpose, began to go down the rabbit hole, began to really, really struggle on the verge of retirement. VA and unit introduced pills and went downhill, added alcohol, ended up, really, really struggling hard. We get him into a treatment center to get all that stuff pulled out of his, daily activity. And then Casey Hildreth, gentleman that works for you, good friend of mine and fellow fifth group brother, told our friend, this is what you need. You need to go experience this. And so Justin goes to Warrior Path. I think he called me the day he came home and he said, you need this. And so
interesting.
I could hear life back in his voice.
Yeah.
And now my curiosity's piqued. Now I'm like, knowing what he was before he went to this training and hearing the life in him on the backside and the conviction in which he was able to tell me, you need this. I immediately went into 18 Fox mode, man. I'm doing that intel assessment. I am researching everything I can find about it. And, as happy as I was for my friend that had been really, really having a hard time and now seeing the possibility of growth, my immediate thought was, what about all the other friends? What about if Cody would have been exposed to this and known, would he still be here? And so I signed up. I went. And it was through that process that I realized there are people doing incredible work to provide that introduction and get the ball rolling in the right direction. But, man, we need people to continue to push that ball uphill.
It's interesting you say that because the first thing I thought about the activities and the mission that you're driving is that's the sustainment plan.
That's it.
Right? Because you have the initial training, you understand the diagnostics of why things are happening to you, which I think intelligent human beings, like most Green Berets I know, when they start realizing they could identify the symptom and diagnose it themselves, that gives them power back, but also kind of detaches them from the circumstances, and they become this passive observer to what's going on in their head. And they're like, oh, my palms are sweating, I'm getting worked up, I'm getting anxious. They're recognizing the pattern of the behavior, and they have tools to manage it. As soon as that experience is done, it's like mental hygiene. If you don't sustain it and you don't practice it, it's going to become perishable.
Yep.
And then you're going to collect plaque, and you're going to get to a point potentially where things start culminating and getting worse off. And I think that's the importance of your mission, is it significantly is a sustainment plan, because when you need that therapy, whether it's getting involved and being part of the team or just being on the run, you could get involved anytime you want in the cycle, or do it yourself. You understand the practice, you understand how to build this, and I imagine there's an evolution of this, how it scales.
And then Warrior's Heart.
Yeah.
So extremely special to me. As an active duty Green Beret, I went into a 28-day inpatient rehab center.
Yeah.
While an active duty SF dude.
Yeah.
The work that they're doing and the friends that I've had that have ended up at Warrior's Heart. We actually had a few team members on this trip, so we had a mix. Talk about continued engagement support. I had a mix of on the team, Warrior Path alumni, and we had two guys that had just recently been down there at Warrior's Heart.
Oh, wow.
And receiving that care. And on the front end of this experience, 9 days, when you think about overlanding, camping, sitting around a fire, I know one of the first things that pops into my head is cracking a cold beer, sitting around that fire in the evening, enjoying a nice meal.
Yeah.
We went into this trip. We did all 9 days completely sober.
I love that, man.
Committed as a team that no matter what the environment, we're going to create this memory and this experience as a sober experience, as a sober memory. And it was incredible to bring those guys in, be able to give them the support and the conviction that we're with you, man, recognizing what you're battling, and we're going to expose you to an adventure that doesn't need all that other junk.
That's so rad.
And it was awesome, man. It was one of the coolest experiences to go through that and know that I take an approach kind of similar to a lot of our SF training, which is we train in the real world. A lot of the things that we do are in and amongst the community and the population to accomplish training objectives. Two Wolf Foundation's programming isn't in a controlled environment, man. We went from Montana to Arizona. We're out in the public eye. We're interacting with people. That's life. At that point in the game, to continue to support our tribe and the wellness that we're chasing, you got to practice it in real life. And so, for me, not being in that controlled environment, you talked about obstacles presented, kind of the pros of what we encountered, and then some of the things that maybe didn't go so well. One of the coolest elements of warrior stewardship to me in involving the overland travel is everything's organic. Nothing's scripted. And a lot of the guys that we had with us, I'm teaching them the mapping apps that I'm using. We're going into an area, we're utilizing, Onyx and Gaia, being able to do an assessment of what may be in the area, but none of us have ever been there. We're going to go hit these trails and push in to go find a spot to live for the night. Might work out, might not.
That's so rad.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
And some of the areas that we came across, doing those assessments, assessing trail conditions, recognizing the capabilities of the trucks, and then how long we're going to be there for, all played into ending up in some pretty amazing spots. And you talk about that immersion in nature, man. There were some spots where we pulled into camp and team members we laughed about it in camp. Like little kids, you just shoot out into the hills and you're running around and exploring and checking everything out. And man, just talk about eliciting those positive emotions and being present in the moment, all that other bullshit in life. At that moment, all that mattered was that, this team was accomplishing the mission, was immersing into the activity that they were doing. And, we had a few hooks thrown our way, but nothing that on the backside of it, we didn't work as a team and overcome. Probably the best example, prior to leaving Montana, we're partnered with iCamper, and they met the rooftop tents that they produce met every need and requirement that I had assessed regarding how to support these individuals over this period of time. Individualized lodging accommodations. Our Tacoma Tango Whiskey 1 has a rooftop tent on the roof and over the bed to provide those two participants their own individual accommodations, And iCamper and partnered with Multicam. iCamper donated one Skycamp Mini, and Multicam purchased the other one, and they were going to have them shipped up to us to Montana prior to this trip. And unfortunately, backlog in shipping, things got redirected. They got stuck in Salt Lake City. Well, I'm looking at the map. I'm like, that's right on our way. Rather than let this beat me up and reduce the value of the trip, we've already got contingencies. We got ground tents in case anything breaks. Hey, we'll just pick those things up in Salt Lake City on the way. I'm talking to the shipping company for days to get things lined up so that we can do a direct pickup from their depot. And everybody flies in. We had a guy flying from Atlanta, Georgia, from Nashville, Tennessee. We had a guy come from New York, and another guy that was up in Bozeman, Montana, and Dallas, Texas. We had guys coming from all across the country to experience this. They get in, we have a reception dinner, and we hit the road. Salt Lake City's day 2 stop. The first night I make these guys sleep in the ground tents. Kind of like hey, see what that's like.
Yeah.
We're upgrading you tomorrow. You're gonna be in these iCampers. We pull in, or we're leaving the dispersed campsite after the first night, and no cell phone service all night. As soon as we hit kind of that buffer near the interstate, my phone starts ringing, and it's a delivery driver. And he's like, "Hey, I've got 2 iCampers that I'm looking to drop off to you in Montana this morning." And I had to pull over, start breathing. We are in the middle.
So you're in Salt Lake City. They're in Montana.
I'm 90 minutes from Salt Lake City.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, man, I've been working and planning and preparing for this trip and bringing these people from across the country to experience overlanding. And there's an element of, I'm an SF dude, man. Rule number one, always look cool.
Yeah.
You're not going to look too cool in a ground tent. They
Yeah.
work. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
them. But there was an element of cool to it that those iCampers make it.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely awesome. And now I'm like, oh my goodness, these dudes are going to be having to set up and break down this big 4-person tent, at every site. And we're moving. We're going to do it. But holy crap. So we come down. We had set up a tour with Black Rifle Coffee to go tour the BRCC headquarters. I'll confess, I wanted to enjoy the tour. Man, my mind was going like 1,000 miles an hour trying to problem solve. How do we overcome this obstacle? These tents are no longer in Salt Lake City. They're headed, they're in Montana. And what we ended up doing is we looked up iCamper dealers in Salt Lake City. We reached out to Expedition Superstore. Hey, you got any iCampers in stock? And they were like, yep. I'm like, okay, I'm on the way. Here we go. Walk into this store. They don't know us.
Yeah.
Here's 5 dudes that we have no relationship.
This is Salt Lake City, right?
Salt Lake City, yeah. Expedition Superstore. And we walk in and I just introduced myself and I said, look, I've got this team of combat veterans that's overlanding from Montana to Arizona to do this stewardship project on the Arizona National Scenic Trail. We had 2 iCampers we were supposed to pick up. They're not here. You guys have 2 in stock. What's it going to take? What do we need to do to be able to walk out with the 2 that you have in stock
and backfill them with the ones
and
that
backfill them direct from iCamper? For me, I'm running through all the liabilities on their end. Like,
oh, there's a lot.
Oh, dude, man.
Yeah.
Like, how about, a safety, a security deposit or give me your credit card. And, I'm just looking at it from their end and wargaming the ever-living crap out of it and thinking, man, there's no way. There's no way they're going to do this. But we end up on the phone with our team at iCamper. Mike over there was like, let me see what I can do. And, dude, they called back in like 25 minutes, had it set up, and it was just one of those experiences of, kind of being kicked in the gut a little bit, being determined to accomplish the mission, problem solve, assess the situation, and the team as a whole never skipped a beat. They were like, we got this, dude. Like, no matter what the outcome is, we're in this now. We're going from Montana to Arizona one way or another, and we're gonna look it up. But for that to take place, that was probably the only and/or biggest hiccup in the entire trip was just procuring those 2 rooftop tents. And by taking that tactical pause, recognizing that, man, we're going to get beat up. You're going to get knocked down. We're going to be presented with challenges. Being surrounded by an incredible team is what made that moment.
You guys got to mount it up and everything?
Oh, everything. So we pick those tents up, we strap them down, we drive back over to the Black Rifle Coffee Company headquarters. They let us pull in the back there, and we're hanging out with Lucas at Grizzly Forge.
Awesome.
And it was just, Tier was out there, and we had just the whole crew hanging out, and the team's getting to work busting boxes and mounting the tents up. And that was, a true element of the vision for me, was seeing these guys just immediately kick it into gear and be working together to accomplish a task or a mission. And by the end of it, they're all laughing, smiling, joking. And it was incredible.
That's rad, man. What I love too is you make the experience a sober one. I know one of the biggest issues I saw growing up in special operations was alcohol consumption. Again, lucky for me, early on, my entire 20s, I didn't drink. I mean, I became a team sergeant, and I started drinking. I make you start drinking. So I didn't drink my entire 20s, but I saw the degradation of individuals, their character, and I would say capability overall being degraded by alcohol consumption, whether it was downrange or back home. And recently, Neil Curry, who's a buddy of mine, and Evan Hafers passed away from suicide. And I say that out loud. Like, I don't want to say it. Part of me is like wants to mask that, but I also want to say it for people who are listening. Like, that's the reality of something that happened. I mean, he killed himself. And why he did it, I won't guess or make assumptions. But alcohol was involved. Fieldcraft, we actually started a water company. And one of the reasons I started that water company was because I wanted alternatives to alcohol and still look cool. You don't look cool drinking an Aquafina around a fire. I wanted the aluminum aspect of survival and preparedness. I wanted to give back to people who were involved in catastrophes. So if we could give back in some way, we could do that. But when Neil died, I used to drink bourbon every night and just crush bottles of bourbon. My tolerance is elevated, so I could drink half a bottle of bourbon and be like, I'm good. And like, I'm not drinking to get a buzz. But that's bullshit. I'm drinking to kind of check out.
Yeah.
And it really affected my mindset and my health. And what I'll say right now is being in a sober state, and then spending time with my children, with the people I love, and experiences has changed my outlook on everything. Because now I get a buzz off of life. I don't need a buzz off of hitting the bottle. And I imagine a lot of the issues that you've seen through your own experiences and then being involved and getting help revolve around the use of alcohol.
It's one of those things that is just a difficult pathway to manage because it was so normalized within the community.
Yeah.
You get in the team room and you know you're going to work hard during the day, but at some point that beer light's going on. And, you know, whether you're still cranking out inventories of property or working on a training concept or a risk assessment for a range, that beer fridge is giving. And it became so normalized that before I knew it, it was, you know, it just was this regular element and aspect of my life. And for a lot of the people that I choose to surround myself with now, we have conversations about the negative influence that it's led to, or, you know, all of the negative experiences. If we look at any moment in time where we found ourselves in a bad spot,
there was alcohol.
There was alcohol involved, man. And it's like, how many times am I going to keep doing this?
Yeah.
And I know that on the addiction side, the struggle that people are facing, but ultimately one of the additional factors of post-traumatic growth, Warrior Path, Two Wolf Foundation, is we got to crawl out of this victimhood crap.
Yeah, for sure.
It's there is choice involved. I know that addiction is one of those things that is gripping and frightening and just wreaks havoc on the mind. But there's choice in there.
Yeah, that bottle didn't crack itself.
You have the power of choice. And at some point in time, you know, we have all felt moments or periods of hitting rock bottom and saying, this isn't working anymore. You begin to restore your power of choice and say, this is not necessary for me anymore. For me, overcoming alcohol abuse, just being immersed in the lifestyle of cracking beers or a bottle of Jack on a regular basis, said I can fill my time more productively with experiences, because if I was boozing, I was just drowning it out. I don't even know what I was drowning out. I mean, I loved war. I loved serving. I loved every bit of my military career I was proud of, and it was just so normalized as the activity that it just went too far. And now, this land stewardship effort, number one, like, I don't want to go swing a pick or be shoveling dirt hungover. That doesn't sound like very fun.
Yeah, it sounds gross.
It sounds horrible.
Yeah.
But, we talk about alcohol's ability to kind of reduce, inhibition and loosen you up in a social. I'm socially awkward as all get out. Maybe there was an element of alcohol, the influence of alcohol that loosened me up and allowed me to converse with people. Coming through the other side of it now, it's just being honest, just being true and honest. Forget ego. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I just want you to know that I care about you. I'm glad that you're here and present in that moment, and I don't need alcohol to do that.
Yeah. I think taking a lead on that is super important, man. I mean, look, it'd be very easy to fit in and go, hey guys, get a beer, let's sit around, but you lose something there. I think when you're not forced to cognitively think about your experience and come up with, the solutions yourself, talk about your problems. When you have booze in you, man, it's just different, man, and I don't like it.
There was one of the nights where we set up camp, and all the chairs are circled up around the fire. Got the whole team together. We just got done cooking dinner, and through that night, we were just continuing to learn about one another early in the trip, and being the team leader, oversight of this trip, and there was a moment there where I sat playing this loop movie in my head that if alcohol was involved, all of these conversations would be disrupted by a dude getting up to go over to the cooler to grab another one it was just like, this is it.
Pissing,
yep.
Talking shit, drifting off in conversation,
yep.
All kinds of stuff.
And it was incredible to say, like, man, this group of people, bring them together. Every one of them knows that taste. And we didn't need it.
I'm going to get you guys a Phil Craft water sponsorship so you just taste water. I think it's
we were knocking some sparkling ices down.
Dude,
like
crush
no other,
it.
though, because
I crushed LaCroix, man. That's why I had to start a water company.
At $1 a piece, and they got some flavor in there. They got some carbonation. I was like, enjoy, boys. That's what you get. But
get hydrated. Let's talk about the vehicle component before we let you go. I'm interested in, we've been having these conversations. I just released recently on YouTube an electric vehicle segment because I'm getting a Ford Lightning that's getting to us on loan from Diamondback Covers, not Ford. Everybody's like, you're a sellout because you're. I'm like, I don't know what that means because it's Ford's an American company. But I also understand that there's a lot of controversy behind electric vehicles because of all the climate stuff that's going on. My big debate and argument was consider it because, I told them, down the road, Lake Jordanelle is how I get power to this house. We've got a hydroelectric dam, which is about 80% of all of the power in the country is privately owned, and the majority of it is being leveraged, at least in rural areas, by hydroelectric dams or hydroelectric anything, power, right? Water flowing through a generator. So I'm interested to get your take on the vehicle component and also bugging out. You guys have 2 Wolf rigs. Is that how it's working? And then is there a plan to evolve that? And what does a standard rig look like? What are the things you have to have?
So in the original concept, we were looking at building a 5-vehicle fleet, a mix of 3 Toyota Tacomas and 2 4Runners.
Yep.
Those 2 platforms, I'm a Toyota fanboy.
Same.
I just absolutely love the modularity and the customization, the reliability, and they're absolutely awesome. A big onus to that in 2 Wolf Foundation being overland centric. My entire entry into the nonprofit world, originally I wanted it to be long distance backpacking. And a lot of people that I sought their opinion regarding standing up my own nonprofit and being focused in the outdoors and connection to nature, dudes were like, man, it sounds awesome, but I don't want to walk anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to carry heavy
Same.
stuff and walk. And right around the time of COVID hitting, there were 2 major inspirations that kind of the light bulb went off. And it was Expedition Overland, Clay and Rochelle.
Good friends, yeah.
Man, we can talk about that another time, but they were a major inspiration, a small group working as a team, experiencing significant adventure, and the Toyotas. I was already like, Toyotas are awesome. These are even more awesome.
Yeah.
And then Mike Pfeiffer, Last Line of Defense, his Weekender Lander stuff. I was like, man, there's something to this with regard to rigging out these trucks and these vehicles that can provide and sustain or support this small mission team for X number of days. And so that's where the overlanding side came in. And,
awesome.
And just looking at it, I said, okay, 5 vehicles. If we're 4 vehicles operational with a 5th in contingency or reserve down on maintenance cycle, that'd be about the appropriate number regarding an overland, trip and dealing with
convoying,
comms, traffic, fitting vehicles into campsites and stuff. I think 4 is an appropriate number. 3 may be it. After an assessment of this recent trip, we ran 3. We did 2 Toyota Tacomas and the 4Runner. The third Tacoma that joined us, we're only at 2 vehicles. The third was we had a Marine veteran join us from He's an employee for Go Fast Campers.
Awesome.
And I met them at I met them at Overland Expo, Mountain West in Colorado, the Go Fast Camper crew. Start talking with Ted, and he's like, dude, this is awesome. Like, what can we do to help? And I'm like, you got any employees that are veterans that you would support their wellness journey and their experience into what Two Wolf Foundation is, that you allow one of your veteran employees? And they were like, Big Mike's the dude, man. Yeah, we're in. So they let him come with us on the trip and bring a third vehicle. And the rigs, the Tacoma, we have a 2020. I sold a house in Georgia, sold off all my other vehicles. Between family and friends, we made about an initial $100,000 investment into standing Two Wolf Foundation up. We bought a 2021 Toyota Tacoma, and we bought a 2020 Toyota 4Runner. The Tacoma's outfitted up top. Overland came on as a sponsor to build out the 4Runner, but we had already invested in, getting the Tacoma built out. Up top Overland roof rack and bed rack and Method 703s, and we're running BF Goodrich KO2s on there. ARB Old Man Emu suspension, which has been good on that.
Perfect.
That Tacoma for what we're doing. Forest Service roads and a mix of highway and off-road stuff. And the 4Runner is basically stock. And I said, hey, if we build out this Tacoma and we make it our flagship and we begin to take this mission to the world and say this is what we're trying to do, looking for incredible partners to build out the next rig for the fleet, and exciting to have Up Top Overland coming on board to do their 5G Alpha roof rack. We're involved with Running for Tacos out of Denver, Colorado. They were like, yeah, man, we want to support this. We're in. So they're gonna be a build partner, and then have an iCamper and multicam involved. It's just
Fieldcraft Survival's involved,
and Fieldcraft Survival.
We'll kit them out with all the loadout, all the mobility bags and med and survival and the visors, and get everything loaded out, and then get swag for all the people who are involved, and then loadout bags for the guys who are actually taking the training expedition.
So that was an issue that we ran into. Was I encouraged everybody that was coming, if you pack a duffel, bring a duffel that fits into the back seats of those trucks pretty good. I said, if you have a suitcase, we'll work through it. No big deal. But definitely one of the AARs, I realized that, number one, we started in Montana, finished in Arizona. I flew everybody back home out of Phoenix. I'm transporting one of the program trucks back to Montana right now, and we're leaning heavily on a friend to drive the other program truck back. So start and end in the same spot to get all the trucks back to home base, back to HQ, and then pack out, organization and pack out stuff. We're running some Pelican cases in the bed of the Tacoma. Kind of a mix of some Home Depot or Lowe's totes and stuff like that to load all the kitchen stuff in. But personal gear, if we start and finish in the same spot, to be able to hand a dude a duffel and say all your personal items in this, and this is the spot where it's stowed, I think would be a significant value added. Yeah,
we'll do that. We got the 80 liter, 40 liter, and the 20 liter that have med and first aid and survival integrated. That's important. How many of these trips do you anticipate you're going to do a year, and how does that look?
So the current game plan in looking at scaling and growth and managing, I'm running this thing basically with some assistance, but I'm running this thing on my own. I think that for the next 3 years, I want to run 3 programs annually for the next 3 years and continue to work out and refine what this looks like, continue to build the appropriate relationships with existing conservation organizations. And I think that manages, here in the West, fire season is a real thing, and it limits a lot of access. It disrupts a lot of, the ability to be out in these areas that we want to work. But a late spring, late summer, and then mid-fall trip, I think are about the most appropriate. And eventually I'd like to get to running 6 trips a year.
Wow. And they're about a week to 2 weeks.
So this one was a big one. We're going to look at refining the timeline as best as we can. The majority of the trips will probably be 6 days or less, with one big annual trip a year. And for us, in recognizing that in order to be well, you have to be doing the work.
Yeah.
So these big trips, we'll be looking at working with our partners like Warriors Heart and Boulder Crest Foundation and other entities that are promoting wellness. And, I envision like a recruiting process to select those team members for this big adventure, for this big mission. And kicking around the idea, I would love, this may be absolutely unrealistic, but where there's a will, there's a way. Two Wolf Foundation positively impacting every U.S. national forest in the United States.
Right.
I envision a recruiting a team that can tag team in and out. I understand that's a major, involvement and investment. But if we put the right people together, the trucks never stop moving, but we just fly people, in and out of areas to conduct link up. Now you're it. And they go hit the next 4 or 5 national forests, and they, conducting camp area cleanups, land stewardship, whatever we can get organized in those areas to have a positive impact, and let that fleet, that rig, positively impact every U.S. national forest led by veterans and first responders.
I love that idea because there's outside of the West, every state, every region, every place needs help because there's guys in every backyard that needs help. But also there's every national forest in every state that needs help as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of places are neglected, even on the East Coast. I grew up jeeping in the Appalachian Trail system, and those things are garbage because they're just littered. There's Coors Light cans everywhere. Yeah, it's bad.
So we finish up with 4 days up in the Four Peaks Wilderness, and everybody's packing up. We're getting the rigs loaded. It's time to go home. And I called the whole team and I said, all right, we got one last project. We have one last mission. And that is we leave every place better than we found it.
Yep.
And through the couple days there, I'd been, grabbing little pieces of trash as I had seen them. But that area that we were in, man, just gross.
Yeah.
Just broken beer bottles everywhere, cans. We'd found an area where, they had just burned piles of trash. And nails all in there. You're talking about bringing the rigs in there. So I said, okay, final task, man. We're going to leave this place better than we found it. And we did. We executed, picked up. We completely sanitized this campsite that we had been living in for 4 days. And we start heading down the mountain. We're headed back to Phoenix. And the teammate that was riding in the Forerunner with me, he goes, all right, man, time for some honesty. He goes, I didn't really like picking up other people's trash. And I'm like, I just started laughing. I'm like, good.
That's good.
Dude, that was it. That was the point, to make you angry about the way that people are treating these places that we go to recreate and spend time and immerse in nature, connect to ourselves. The therapeutic landscape aspect. It's not very therapeutic when I'm sitting in piles of garbage out there at a campsite, or I want to take my kids to go on an evening picnic in the national forest and pull in and it's just wrecked. Trash all in the fire pit, junk everywhere. I said, good, man. That was the point.
Yeah.
Because if we're building a coalition of warrior stewards, I need you angry about what you experienced.
Yeah. That's what selflessness is, right? You have to be, we've been picking up people's trash for 20 years in the military.
Yeah.
That's what we do. I want to be involved. I think it's going to be an amazing experience to be involved in any way, whether it's like, me and Mike Hernandez teach the mobility experience. We actually are partnered with Expedition Overland. We do a whole bunch of content with them. We have content plans, including motorcycle trips for 2023. In February, the first weekend in February, prior probably to your spring trip, we have Go Rigs and Coffee. And then at the end of the month, we have the mobility experience, which is the last weekend of February, which is down in Spanish Fork. We have access to Kafaru's 2,500-acre ranch, and we teach survival, first aid, security, overlanding, maintenance, recovery, all the stuff, even driving techniques, because not a lot of people know how to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'll throw you a slot. I'd love to see you come out and be part of that, because there might be something in there, whether it's the technical training aspect and the protocol or process that maybe your instructors can go through as a preliminary. I would throw you that training for free. So if you have an instructor you vetted and you want them to get a baseline of like, hey, this is the base, because we run this course 4 times a year. We got 2 slots per mobility experience with Fieldcraft. I want you to get in there, get your baseline training, and come back so you're prepared at least with a foundation of being able to get to the trail and execute. We'll also outfit you guys as rigs and support your staff with anything you want. I'm also going to throw it out because I'm a partner of Black Rifle Coffee. We're going to sponsor you guys with coffee and see if we can get BRCC Fund. I'll get on the phone with Jay Fain to see if we can get BRCC Fund to make a donation because this is something that needs to be done. But also selfishly, I just want to be involved, man. Being involved in the backcountry with no there'll be a media guy there likely, but where it's not about that, it's about the mission, would be amazing. And it's an amazing mission, man. I think what you're doing is important. I'll leave it to you for closing thoughts.
Well, man, I appreciate it. And, you know, in having this vision restore my own purpose and identity and mission set. You know, to go from being a warfighter, that was me. If somebody asked you, who are you? I'm a Green Beret. I'm an SF dude. I'm this, I'm that. When that was gone, you know, struggled hard. And now being revitalized, being reinvigorated with this, with having a passion, now it's just like, okay, can I share this with the tribe? And it's been incredible. Running into you in the parking lot, the happenstance of that moment. I think that our visions and commonalities align greatly with what we're both trying to accomplish. And I'm beyond grateful. Look forward to attending the mobility training. I think that there are aspects of that absolutely I'm thankful to invest that time into and to have your support. And it's just about warriors protecting wild lands. I mean, you know, it's a new mission, and so I'm thankful that you see that as a valid effort, and giving the opportunity to share it with your followers, be on the podcast, in the midst of making my way through this trip. It's been absolutely awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. Guys, look at the notes below. All the links to Brian's stuff and everything he has going on. I'm also going to have him on the Black Rifle Coffee podcast later on in this year. I think this, like, a lot of people don't pay attention to this anymore. Veteran advocacy is becoming a not so popular trend. So people aren't interested in helping Gold Star families, veterans that are struggling. But telling you from experience, these are things that we need to do now, or I'm going to have more casualties outside of the military experience, which is closely approaching that in suicides, than I lost friends in war. And I don't want to see that happen. Stand behind this effort, see how you can get involved, see all the links below. And I appreciate you guys tuning in to the podcast and supporting these type of important mission sets. Later, guys.
That concludes today's training. Any questions? Woo! Drum titties, boy!